television is. Claire began lecturing with a test stick in her hands. It doesn't necessarily broadcast the information people want to know, the information they should know, or the truth. Instead, it manipulates information so that the government, and the forces that control the government, can prevent the public from realizing the truth, and make them believe falsehoods as if they were true. TV is the perfect tool for brainwashing the people. Don't you think so? Chris and Sana looked at each other and tilted their heads, saying, I don't know. For example, let's say there's a popular student at school, but there are some people who don't like him. What do you think should be done if those people try to knock the popular student down? Chris groaned and tilted his head.
Like spreading bad rumors?
Sana answered next to Chris, who was thinking deeply with his arms folded. Exactly, Claire said, pointing the tip of the test stick at Sana. They spread lies about what that person is really like, and it gives the popular person a negative image. Even if one person says something like that and no one takes it seriously. When several people spread the same thing over and over, everyone starts to believe it's true. And then, that popular person has lost his status before he knew it. Chris asked, but what does that have to do with TV? Claire held him back with her hand as she continued. TV does have a same kind of intention. By broadcasting images repeatedly, media such as television and newspapers can imprint the information they want onto people's brains. And at the same time, they do this to an unspecified number of people.
So you're saying they use television and newspapers to make someone popular, or conversely, to bring someone down?
Claire shook her head in response to Chris' question. The example I just gave was simply to illustrate how information is manipulated to control people. Claire looked into Chris' face, as if to check his understanding. Even on the surface world, there are forces that consider themselves to be gods, so to speak, who control everything. You could call them the dark forces.
The dark forces?
Chris asked. The dark forces are those who are trying to stop the ascension of the earth. Could it be that they exist on Earth too? Claire nodded, reading Chris's thoughts. Of course, dark forces exist on the surface world too. Or rather, the surface world is dominated by dark forces, and countries and governments are controlled by them from the shadows.
What? So, does that mean the Earth has already been taken over by dark forces?
Chris thought, if the Earth is already under the control of dark forces, then the point of coming to the underground world this time becomes unclear. Claire explained about that. The surface world has been under the control of dark forces for ages, but that didn't mean there was any danger of the Earth disappearing. That was because the Earth hadn't yet reached the stage of ascending to a higher dimension, but now that it has, the Earth is also at risk of disappearing.
What is the relationship between ascending to a higher dimension and disappearance?
Chris still hadn't quite grasped the difference between ascension and disappearance. Ascension and disappearance are two sides of the same coin. Anyway, there should be a more detailed explanation about that later from Salit in the central office. Claire said, digressing from the topic and returning the conversation to the TV. Anyway, the quickest way for the dark forces to control all humans is to manipulate information. And because people never dream that false information could be coming from their country or government, they just accept the information they see on TV as the truth, without questioning whether it's true or false. Without knowing that it's information that's been manipulated.
I see.
Chris nodded, and next to him Sana muttered, I just can't believe that. Claire glanced at Sana and said, well, you don't have to believe me, and continued. Through television, humans are unknowingly instilled with fear, anxiety, jealousy and guilt. What is a happy life? What kind of life should we lead and what kind of life should be despised? What should we eat and what shouldn't we eat? What ways of thinking are normal and what ways of thinking are abnormal? All of these thoughts, ideas, beliefs and emotions have been manipulated. Claire looked at the two of them with a serious gaze, and shrugged and said, "Well, that's all something I learned at school. I've never actually watched TV."
But it's not like all the information broadcast on TV is a lie, right?
Sana asked, brushing her hair away from her face. "Of course, it's not all a lie," Claire replied proudly, blinking slowly. "But even before that, what can and can't be broadcast is being manipulated."
Well, obviously, they have to restrict things like violent images and things that children shouldn't watch, right?
No, it's not like that. Rather, ideas and ways of thinking that are a hindrance to brainwashing the public. And even content that defends them, are manipulated before they are broadcast in the media.
Ideologies that hinder brainwashing,
Sana muttered, leaning back in the couch. Then, after thinking for a moment, she asked again.
What kind of ideologies or ways of thinking can hinder mind control, for example?
For example, about the origins of humanity and the true capabilities of humanity or something like that. Claire replied, adjusting the bracelet on her left arm. It was the same silver miracorn that she had given to Chris. If humans could unlock their innate abilities, they would be able to fly like us. And they would be able to control time and space, allowing them to move between dimensions with a certain degree of freedom. And magia, well, is it magic? They would be able to use that as well, as if it were the most natural thing they could do.
Really?
Claire nodded in response to the surprised Chris.
If that's true, why doesn't humanity make this ability available?
That's just what I said. Claire sighed in exasperation. Because if humanity were to become aware of these abilities and possibilities that humans possess, the dark forces would no longer be able to keep humanity under their control. By making people believe that they are slaves to their circumstances, powerless beings who can do nothing, the dark forces are able to control humanity as they wish.
Oh, I see, that's what you mean by mind control.
Chris finally understood, and Claire shook her head in exasperation.
So if we were not mind controlled, we'd be able to fly freely in the sky and use magic?
Yes, that's right, and besides, both of you have already been able to come to this underground world, right? That's proof that you're starting to be freed from mind control.
Are you sure?
Yes. Information about our existence and this underground world has been manipulated on the surface world. So while you're brainwashed, you wouldn't be able to notice this, much less set foot in the underground world. In other words, both of you, who were able to recognize our existence and come to the underground world, are free from brainwashing. Hearing this, Chris remembered that the neighbor who had driven a pickup truck not noticed Claire and Ramal at the castle that day.
So, does that mean we can use magic now?
Chris leaned forward, unable to contain his excitement. Claire shook her head. To be able to use magia, you might need to expand the limits you've placed on yourself a bit more.
Expand the limits?
Yeah, right now, you yourself think it's impossible to do it. But as you get used to this world, that notion will gradually be removed, and you'll be able to do it eventually.
Well, I see.
If asked whether it's impossible, Chris thought, well, it might actually be the case. But, Sana interjected.
Why do the dark forces not want people on the surface to know about the underground world and the existence of people like you?
Because if humanity were to become aware of our existence, many of the things the dark forces have deceived people about up until now would turn out to be lies. The same goes for life forms on other planets and the truth about the universe. If humanity begins to explore their existence and possibility, or if they start to make contact with beings from other planets, then the lies the dark forces have made people believe would be revealed, humanity would wake up, and the mind control would be broken.
The dark forces want to keep control over humanity at all costs.
Claire nodded at Sana's words and continued. Plus, television constantly sends out signals that make you feel restless, anxious, and helpless, and that reduce your motivation and thinking. So if you watch TV all the time, you become less able to express your emotions, it becomes harder to create reality, and you lose your desires and hopes. Well, that's exactly what those in control have in mind. After she finished, Claire crossed her legs and held her knees with her hands. That's what about TV, got it?
Well, sort of.
Chris nodded, thinking it would be best to at least try not to watch too much TV. Well then, let's go. Leaving the room, Elandra and Ramal were waiting for them in the hall.
Is it all right?
Elandra asked who sat on the kuteya.
Wait a moment, I need to drop off my luggage too.
Sana said, and jogged off to her room.
Is it okay not to get any sleep?
Elandra asked as Chris sat down on the kuteya.
Yeah, I'm not tired at all. Besides, it's still so bright outside, so I'm fine.
When Chris answered that, Claire gave a sly smile. You say it's bright outside, but over here, it's been this bright the whole time.
What, all day?
Claire nodded in agreement to the surprised Chris. In the first place, there's no concept of a day.
So that means there's no morning, noon, or night.
Claire nodded again.
So, when do you go to bed and when do you wake up? What about breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Chris kept asking Claire questions, but she shook her head repeatedly. You only sleep and eat as much as you need, when you need it. There are no rules about when you sleep, wake up, or eat. Hearing this, Chris remembered that the underground people can survive without eating. When he came to the underworld in his previous life, Elandra explained this to him. So maybe not sleeping isn't such a big deal, Chris thought. We eat and sleep for different reasons than people on the surface world. Claire said, we eat to promote grounding so we can become one with the earth, and we sleep, of course, to give our bodies a rest. But if all you want to do is rest, entering a physical recovery device called Margarium is enough. The main purpose of sleeping is to dream. Also, when you need to access beings in other dimensions or adjust your vibrations. She said, clicking the tips of the testics she held in both hands together. Then Sana came out of the room. Sana looked satisfied as she closed them all, saying, Benel, with the testic in one hand. Are you ready, Sana? Elandra asked, and Sana bowed her head slightly.
Well then, shall we go get the Pula tailored?
Elandra called out, and everyone stood up.